Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting ready for what was basically a head-on collision between two massive players in the crypto space. On one side, you have Zhou. He's the CEO of Bybit, a huge crypto exchange.
Right, a huge one.
And on the other, you've got Pi Network, this mobile mining project with a gigantic and incredibly loyal community all over the world.
And this wasn't just some argument on X, This thing completely blew up in early 2025. It was a full-on public war that made everyone in the space kind of step back and ask, what is actually going on here? What's at stake?
Exactly. And that's our mission with this deep dive. It's not really to decide, is Pi Network a scam or is it legit?
We'll leave that to the regulators and, the market to figure out.
Yeah, our goal is different. We want to take a look at the motives behind the fight itself.
It's a perfect case study.
Yeah.
Our analysis calls it a prime example of conflict of interest in crypto media, and we're going to use it as a kind of lens.
A lens to do what exactly?
Yeah, to really dissect the claims, fact check what was said, but more importantly, to expose the hidden agendas, to understand how much of this was driven by financial self-interest and reputational damage control.
That's the real question, isn't it? When a guy who runs $1 billion exchange stands up and yells scam about another project, how do you, as someone trying to stay informed, separate a real warning meant to protect people from, a calculated PR move to protect his own business?
Because if you can't tell the difference, you're just consuming propaganda.
Right. So we're drawing from a really detailed fast check analysis that tracked every move, every claim, every counterclaim in this whole saga.
And what we're going to show you is that in the high-stakes world of crypto, the idea of a neutral observer, it's pretty much an illusion.
Okay, so to really get this, we have to understand just how fast everything happened. This wasn't some slow burn debate.
No, not at all. This was a really rapid, almost reactive chain of events. It all played out over about 3 weeks in early 2025.
It's a great example of how fast a narrative can be built and torn down online.
For sure. So let's lay out the timeline. It all kicks off on February 20th, 2025.
And this is the first shot fired. Right,
yeah.
Directly from Zhou.
Yeah, he just came out swinging.
Yeah.
He went on the record very publicly and basically dropped a bombshell. He called Pi Network a scam.
Not just that he had concerns, but just flat out scam.
Flat out. And he said very clearly that there would be no listing for Pi on Bybit, period. It was a complete public blacklisting of the project.
And because he's the CEO of Bybit, that's not just some random opinion. That's a headline.
Oh, it immediately became a huge story. Our sources confirm all the big outlets, CoinDesk, finance magnates, they all picked it up. He was using Bybit's massive reputation to basically put a stop sign in front of a project with millions of users.
Okay, but then what happened right after that is really key to understanding the manipulation that was going on.
It's so important. On the very same day, February 20th, we're talking almost instantly after Zhou's statement, a counter story pops up.
From this anonymous X account.
Right, an anonymous account designed to look like it was the Pi Tech team.
And what did they claim?
They just put out a total fabrication, a lie. They claimed that Pi Network had actually rejected a listing offer from Bybit.
Wow, so they tried to completely flip the script.
Exactly. It's a classic PR move. It makes it look like Pi Network is the one with the high standards, and Bybit is the one that got rejected, not the other way around.
Turning a condemnation into a power move. But a lie that bold, it's not going to hold up for long.
And it didn't. It fell apart really quickly once people started asking questions.
I bet.
Our deep dive material confirmed it. Later on, both Zhou and the official Pi Network team confirmed the truth. Bybit never even asked for a listing.
So that whole counterclaim was just made up.
Completely manufactured, just to try and take the sting out of Zhou's attack.
And that lie, that manipulation, was so public, it actually forced the real Pi Network team, who are usually pretty quiet, to say something.
They had to. About a week later, on February 27th, they put out an official statement.
And Cointelegraph verified this, right?
Yep. They officially denied any link to that anonymous, misleading X account. But notice the wording.
What about it?
It's a really important nuance. They just said, that account isn't ours. They didn't condemn the lie itself or the people behind it. They were just in damage control mode.
Just creating distance.
Exactly.
But the community, Pi's user base, they're not a PR team. They're way more passionate.
Oh, yeah. They had already seen the initial conflict, and they were not happy. They decided to fight back.
And this is where it stops being a corporate fight and turns into, a digital mob.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
On March 9th, the Pi community launched what our analysis calls a coordinated attack.
This wasn't just angry posting, this was organized.
It was very organized. They went after Bybit's app with one-star reviews. They were trying to cause real, tangible business damage by review bombing them.
And the data on this is just, it's wild. You can actually measure the effect.
Oh, absolutely. The analysis verified it. Bybit's App Store rating, which is, a huge signal of trust for users,
Just everything.
it plunged. It went from a nearly perfect 5-star rating all the way down to 2.7 stars in just a few days.
That's a massive hit. That shows you the power of that community.
It's a serious display of power and a direct financial hit to Bybit's reputation.
And you have to imagine that just made Zhou furious. This wasn't just talk anymore.
Right. So a few days after that, on March 13th, he came back and doubled down.
He escalated things even more.
He turned the volume way up. He warned that Pi was, and I'm quoting, more dangerous than meme coins.
More dangerous than meme coins. What's the implication there?
Well, everyone knows meme coins are a gamble, right?
Yeah.
They're openly speculative. It's like going to a casino.
Sure.
By calling Pi more dangerous, he was suggesting there was something deeper, something more malicious hiding behind this facade of being a real project.
So just to recap the timeline, a CEO attacks. Anonymous accounts lie to defend. The official project denies the liars. The community attacks the CEO's business. And the CEO escalates his attack to the highest level.
It's a perfect storm, a perfect picture of a high-stakes, highly emotional crypto war.
Okay, so now that we have the timeline, we need to slow down and actually look at what Zhou is saying.
Right, let's fact-check the claims themselves. He made 4 core arguments, and we need to pick each one apart to see if it holds water.
Let's start with the big one. The headline grabber. Claim 1. Pi Network is a scam. What was his proof for a statement that huge?
So Zhou was actually pretty smart about this. He didn't just say, I have a bad feeling. He cited a real verifiable source.
Okay, what was it?
It was a police warning from 2023 issued by Chinese authorities.
A police warning? That sounds serious.
It is, and the allegation in that warning was really specific and damaging. It claimed the network was targeting vulnerable people, especially seniors, and was possibly stealing their personal data.
Wow. Okay, so if you're just reading the news and you see CEO cites official police warning, you probably stop right there.
You do. You think, case closed, it must be a scam. It gives his claim a ton of weight.
But there's always a but.
There's always a but. Our source material immediately brings in the counter context, the piece of the story Zhou conveniently left out.
Which is?
Yes, the police warning is real. That part is true. However, Pi Network's official response is that the warning was actually aimed at fraudsters who were impersonating the official project.
So not the project itself, but clones and fakes trying to capitalize on its name.
Exactly. This is a huge problem, especially in regions like China, where tech adoption is massive. You get these sophisticated clone websites, fake apps, fake investment groups, all using the Pi brand to trick people out of money or data.
That completely changes the context. A warning against impersonators is actually a sign of popularity, not necessarily fraud in the core project.
Right. It means your brand is big enough to be worth copying. And Pi Network also stated that the Pi Network Foundation itself was never contacted directly by the Chinese police about any investigation.
So Zhou used a real piece of data, the police warning, but he stripped out all the crucial context that would have weakened his argument.
He weaponized a fact by omitting the full story, which is why the analysis rates that claim as misleading. The source he cited was real, but the way he used it was dishonest.
Okay, let's move on to claim 2. This one's more about the structure of the project. He said Pi Network is a Ponzi scheme, like BitConnect or HEX.
Yeah, tying it to some of the biggest scams in crypto history.
So what was his reasoning there?
His basis was the referral model. He's pointing out that early users get much higher mining rewards, and those rewards go down as more people join. So later users have a much harder time earning value.
Which is structurally similar to a pyramid or Ponzi, where the whole thing depends on recruiting new people to benefit those at the top.
That's the argument. And to be fair, it's not just Zhou saying this. This is a valid analytical concern that other outlets like CoinDesk and CryptoPotato have also raised. It's a potential structural weakness.
Okay, so it's a valid critique. But is a structural risk the same thing as a proven Ponzi scheme?
That's the key question. The legal definition of a Ponzi requires proving that the founders intended to defraud people from the start, that there's no legitimate underlying product. And that's a very, very high bar to clear.
And what about the actual numbers, the scale of the project?
The scale is what makes the Ponzi label really tricky. Pi Network is reporting over 100 million downloads. And more importantly, something like 10.8 million users have actually passed KYC and are verified on the mainnet.
That's a lot of people.
It is. And the source material argues that a typical quick exit Ponzi scheme would have likely collapsed long before reaching that kind of global scale and level of user verification.
So where does that leave the claim?
The final status is nuanced. It's a valid analytical concern because of the referral model. But calling it a fact, saying it is a Ponzi, that's inaccurate. It's still just an opinion, an unproven one.
But that nuance gets lost when you just shout Ponzi in a headline.
It absolutely does.
Okay, claim 3. The founders never appear publicly. Zhu's point was that the team is mostly anonymous, even though they talk about their Stanford background and they won't do public interviews or debates.
And on the surface, that's true. The Pi team is, in fact, largely anonymous. So the claim itself is confirmed as true.
This is crypto. The founder of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, is the most anonymous person of all. Is anonymity really proof of a scam?
And that is the huge piece of context that our analysis brings in. It's not proof of fraud in and of itself. But more than that, it highlights some major hypocrisy from Zhou.
How so?
For years, Bybit's own founder, a person named Yi, was basically a ghost. Nobody knew who they were. And even Zhou himself has been criticized for not being totally transparent about some of his own business matters.
So he's hitting Pi Network for being anonymous while his own company has a history of the same thing.
Exactly. It's a double standard. The source argues he's selectively applying a standard to his competitors that he hasn't always applied to himself. That tells you the criticism is more political than principled.
Right. Okay, last one. Claim 4. Bybit never requested a listing.
This was Zhu's response to that fake PiX account that lied and said Pi had rejected Bybit.
And this one is straightforward.
This is the only one where everyone agrees. It's verified. Both Zhou and the official Pi Network team confirmed it. Bybit never applied, so the story of Pi rejecting them was a total lie.
So this is the one moment where Zhou was on solid ground, just responding to clear misinformation.
Yes, and it's significant because the actions of that unofficial account, that attempt at public manipulation, it gave Zhou a legitimate reason to be critical of the project's ecosystem.
It proved that there were, at the very least, bad actors operating in Pi's orbit.
It did. It lent some credibility to the idea that the whole situation was shady, even if the core team wasn't behind that specific lie.
So when you put it all together, Zhu's big attack was a mix of, misleading half-truths, valid but unproven concerns, and a big dose of hypocrisy.
That's a pretty good summary. And it makes it very clear that this whole thing wasn't just about protecting users. Which brings us to the biggest question of all.
What was the real motive? What was really at stake for everyone involved?
Exactly. So now we have to shift from what was said to why it was said. When a powerful CEO launches a public campaign this aggressive, you have to follow the money.
And the reputation.
And the reputation. Let's start with Ben Zhou and Bybit. He's running a massive multi-billion-dollar exchange. What's the financial and reputational calculus behind his decision to just publicly nuke Pi Network?
There had to be a strong reason.
There were two, and they fit together perfectly. The first is about perception and regulation. Bybit, like all major exchanges, is trying to move away from that Wild West crypto image.
They want to be seen as a responsible exchange, right? To attract institutional money.
That's the long-term goal. And choosing not to lift a controversial, unproven project like Pi is a form of regulatory self-preservation. It's risk management.
If they list Pi and it turns out to be a scam and collapses, that's a huge stain on their record. It could scare away the big money players.
Right. So avoiding Pi makes them look safer, more trustworthy. But that's only part of it. The second motive is way more critical, and it has to do with a massive scandal that was happening at the exact same time.
This is the real bombshell in the analysis, isn't it?
It is. The timing is just unbelievably damning.
So what was it?
In February 2025, the very same month that Zhou started his public attack on Pi Network, Bybit itself was the victim of a colossal security breach.
A hack.
A massive one, reportedly carried out by the Lazarus Group.
The North Korean state-sponsored hackers.
The very same. And the amount they allegedly stole, $1.5 billion.
Wait, let me get this straight. Ben Zhou was on a public crusade screaming about the potential risks of Pi Network, while his own exchange was simultaneously losing $1.5 billion to hackers.
That is the giant unspoken context for this entire conflict. His very loud, very public criticism of another project was the perfect distraction from the catastrophic security failure happening in his own house.
That just destroys his whole "I'm protecting users" argument. A $1.5 billion hack isn't a small problem. That's a crisis.
It's a five-alarm fire. A loss on that scale brings intense scrutiny from regulators, it causes investors to panic, and it makes the public question whether your platform is competent or even safe to use.
So this was classic misdirection.
It's PR 101. When your house is burning down, you point at your neighbor's overgrown lawn and yell about the fire hazard. Zhou was desperately trying to change the conversation away from Bybit's vulnerabilities and towards the much smaller, more abstract risks of Pi Network.
So his motive wasn't pure. He was acting as a reputation protector for a platform that had just suffered one of the biggest hacks in recent memory.
Exactly. His self-interest, both financially and reputationally, demanded that he find a target to attack. And Pi Network was the perfect one.
Okay, so let's flip it. What about Pi Network? What did they have at stake?
For them, it's all about growth and legitimacy. Their entire financial future depends on getting listed on major exchanges.
A listing on a platform like Bybit would bring a huge amount of visibility, liquidity.
It would be a game changer. It would be the step that takes them from a mobile mining app to a real, tradable crypto asset. Zhu's public blacklisting was a threat to cut off that path from one of the world's biggest markets.
And reputationally, having a big CEO call you a scam, that's gotta hurt.
It does immense damage. That message spreads to other exchanges, to the media, to potential partners. It paints you as toxic, as too risky to touch.
So what did the analysis say about Pi's own transparency score, separate from all this?
It rated it as low. And this is where Pi has to be held accountable. The source highlights a few key problems. The team is still anonymous, which creates a trust deficit. They have a history of missing their own deadlines and milestones. And their response during this whole crisis was purely reactive. They only spoke up after the damage was already done.
So you have two giants in a fight. Zhou being very public, but also desperately trying to distract from a billion-dollar disaster.
And Pi Network, fighting for its future but held back by its own lack of transparency and a chaotic ecosystem. It's a perfect storm of self-interest from every angle.
And when a conflict gets that intense, with that much at stake, you often see, well, you see behavior that crosses a line.
For sure. The analysis moves beyond just the facts and critiques the conduct of everyone involved. It points to three really controversial moments that show a breakdown in ethics.
Let's start with the one that just hangs over this entire story. Zhu's own credibility on security.
The $1.5 billion hack by the Lazarus Group. You really can't overstate how big a deal that is. We need to be clear for everyone listening. The Lazarus Group isn't just some random hacker. This is a highly sophisticated, state-sponsored cybercrime unit.
They target huge financial institutions.
Exactly. For a major exchange to be breached by them suggests a failure at the absolute highest level of security.
So the core question the analysis raises is, it's pretty simple, right?
It is. How can a CEO who oversaw a failure that led to a $1.5 billion loss of user funds get on a soapbox and credibly criticize anyone else's security standards?
It just makes his entire argument ring hollow.
It completely undermines his moral authority on the subject. He's trying to position Bybit as the safe, responsible choice, but the evidence of his own platform's massive failure invalidates that completely. His critique of Pi's potential risks just looks like a desperate PR stunt.
Okay, so that's a huge ethical problem on Zhu's side. What's the second controversial point?
This one focuses on the response from the other side. The Pi community's mob mentality. Specifically, that coordinated review bombing campaign that cratered Bybit's App Store rating.
Right, the drop to 2.7 stars.
The source is unequivocal about this. The behavior is unethical. Mass manipulating a review system isn't a form of legitimate protest.
No, it's an attempt to cause commercial harm through deception.
It's an emotional attack. It's vengeance, not a reasoned argument. And ironically, that kind of behavior probably did more damage to Pi Network's own reputation than it did to Bybit.
Oh, so?
Because it sends a clear signal to regulators, to investors, to any serious business partner that this project is surrounded by an irrational, volatile community that can't handle criticism.
It makes them look immature and toxic.
Exactly. It screams, we can't have a professional disagreement without resorting to mob tactics. In the world of high finance, that's a death sentence for your reputation.
Okay, and the third point. This one goes back to the Pi Network team itself.
Yes, it's about how they handled the lie from that unofficial X account, the one that falsely claimed Pi rejected Bybit.
They denied it was their account. What was wrong with that?
The denial itself was fine, but it didn't go far enough. The source argues they failed to take full accountability for the ecosystem that allowed that lie to spread.
What should they have done differently?
They needed to not just deny association, but to actively and publicly condemn the lie and the people who spread it.
So a statement saying something like, We condemn this manipulative behavior, and we don't tolerate anyone spreading lies on our behalf.
Exactly that. By just shrugging and saying, that wasn't us, they allow these manipulative actors in their orbit to keep operating without consequence.
It suggests a tolerance for deception as long as they can claim they weren't directly involved.
It does. And for a project that already has a transparency problem, that's a really bad look.
Okay, so after going through the timeline, the claims, the hidden motives, and the bad behavior, where do we land?
The main conclusion from the analysis is pretty simple and pretty damning. In this fight, neither side is clean.
Not even close. It's a perfect example of how money and reputation just poison any chance of objective debate in the crypto world.
Let's just quickly sum up the two sides. On one hand, you have Zhou and Bybit.
Okay, they were transparent in their communication at least. He was public, he cited sources.
He did, but he lost all credibility on the topic of security because of that massive $1.5 billion hack. And his motivation was so clearly about deflecting from his own crisis.
And then you have Pi Network.
They had some legitimate points, for sure. The idea that the Chinese warnings were about impersonators, not them, and that the fake X account wasn't official, those are valid defenses.
But those defenses are drowned out by their own persistent problems.
Right. The anonymous team, the constant missed deadlines, the reactive communication, and, maybe worst of all, their failure to get a handle on the mob behavior of their own community. They have so much work to do on transparency and governance.
So the analysis pulls 4 key lessons out of this mess. 4 takeaways that you, listening to this, can apply to pretty much any financial news story you see.
Yeah, these are really practical. Lesson 1 is that neutrality is an illusion.
You have to assume everyone has an angle.
You have to. When a powerful executive publicly attacks a competitor, you must assume it's driven by a financial or reputational motive. Bybit needed to look safe for regulators, and Pi needed listings to grow. No one was acting out of pure public service here.
Lesson 2 is about communication.
Right. Transparency matters. Even though Zhu's motives were dirty, his method of communicating being public, citing data, was structurally better than Pi's quiet, reactive denials.
Being public, even when things are messy, usually builds more trust than silence.
It does. Lesson 3 is aimed right at the community.
Mob mentality is destructive.
It really is.
Yeah.
That review bombing attack did more long-term damage to Pi's image than anything else. It gave critics concrete proof that the project's community was immature and uncontrollable.
A huge red flag for any serious investor. And finally, lesson 4. This comes back to Zhou.
Consistency is key. You can't credibly criticize someone else for something you have failed at on a spectacular scale.
The $1.5 billion hack just invalidated his entire argument about security.
It did. When a critic's actions are the opposite of their words, you have to recognize that the criticism is self-serving. It's that simple.
So this whole deep dive really shows that when you see one of these big public fights in crypto, you're not just watching an argument about technology.
No, you're watching a high-stakes chess match for reputation, for market share, and for survival. The truth is usually buried under layers of strategy and self-interest.
Which leaves us with the final directive from our source analysis. For you, the listener, trying to make sense of all this noise, what's the one rule to follow?
The advice is timeless, really. Trust data, not personalities. Verify claims no matter who makes them.
Don't trust Zhou because he's a famous CEO, and don't trust Pi Network because it has millions of followers.
Exactly. Look at the verifiable track record, look at the security audits or lack thereof, look at the data, and always ask yourself what financial motive the speaker has.
Always ask. If this person is screaming about someone else's problem, what huge problem of their own are they trying to distract me from right now?
That critical lens is the only real shield you have in these kinds of corporate wars.
And that is the true lesson from the battle between Zhou and Pi Network. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you'll apply that critical standard to everything you read from here on out.